Good afternoon. As we continue to look at Jesus' parables of the kingdom this Lent, today's parable seems to have basically the same message as the last one we looked at. They're often lumped together. In my last devotion, I talked about Jesus' parable of the kingdom of heaven being like a mustard seed, that it's something small which carries significant importance. And in today's parable, Jesus compares the kingdom to yeast in a massive lump of dough. And yes, we find the same point. A little bit of yeast affects the entire batch. But it seems that there's a lot more going on here than just that. The first thing we need to notice, though, in Jesus' parable is he's talking about a lot of dough. Jesus says that the yeast is at work in 60 pounds worth of dough. I suppose that maybe they work with batches that large in factory bakeries today, but I doubt anyone in Jesus' time ever tried to knead a 60-pound lump of dough. Have you? Jesus' parables typically include a surprising twist like this. He catches our attention with something unexpected. Why in the world would any baker be working with such a giant batch of dough? Are they trying to make the world's biggest loaf of bread? By talking about the yeast being at work in 60 pounds of dough, Jesus draws attention to the incredible ability of yeast. It doesn't matter how much dough you have. Just a little bit of yeast will make it all rise. Oh, it might take a bit longer if you're talking about 60 pounds worth of dough, but it'll still do the job. In the same way, God's influence in the world might not seem very significant. In fact, we may not even notice his subtle workings, but they are there. Just as a speck of yeast can transform an entire batch of dough, God turns the world on its head through seemingly trivial agents. Through seemingly trivial, inconsequential agents like me and you. You don't have to be the president. You don't have to be an emperor to change the world. You only need to be the yeast of God's kingdom. So in what ways are you at work to turn this world into the kingdom of heaven? And that's a second thing to notice about this yeast and the way that it's different from a mustard seed. The mustard seed changes itself. It goes from being a tiny pinprick into being a giant bush. The yeast, on the other hand, changes its surroundings. I'm no expert, but I don't think that yeast becomes something different in its process of making bread rise. It's the dough around the yeast that becomes something completely different. The yeast transforms it from a dense, heavy blob into the light, airy stuff that makes for wonderful bread. This is what the kingdom of heaven does to us. This is what the kingdom of heaven does to the world around us. It transforms us into something wonderful and delightful for the Lord. And when we are acting as yeast, we are making a difference in the world around us. Sometimes it's hard to see. You might not even think you're making any difference at all. But that's the assurance that Jesus offers in this parable. We are making a difference, just like the yeast changes the dough. Oh, it's easy to look at the world around us and see how bad things are. And at times it seems as though people's attempts to improve the world only cause different problems. But Jesus' parable gives us the encouragement we need. The yeast is at work. Watch, and you'll see what it's doing. There's one more thing to know about yeast. Yeast is alive. It is a living organism. I learned that lesson the hard way once. I tried to use some old yeast when I was making bread, but the yeast was so old that it had died, and it was actually nothing more than just powdery dust. And so it didn't do my lump of dough any good. Let's just say you should be glad you didn't eat the bread that came from it. Yeast is alive. We are God's living yeast. We are alive and active to do his amazing will. But if we allow ourselves to become passive and lifeless, just to sit back and expect God to do it on his own, just to think we can sit here and just watch what will happen, well then, we're not much good for anything, and not much good is going to happen. So how are you keeping yourself alive so you can be part of the revolution that God is causing? Would you pray with me, please? Lord, I pray both that your yeast will be at work in our lives and that we can be yeast ourselves. Change us, Lord. Transform us by your wonderful workings of your Spirit within us, so that each day, perhaps imperceptibly, but constantly, we are becoming more and more the people of your kingdom. But I also pray, Lord, that you'd make us change agents. Make us your yeast to transform this world into what you desire for it to be. Help us to work together and help us to watch for your guidance so that we may do your will. Amen. Thanks for joining me. We'll talk again later.